Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasting.
California has the largest population in the United States and the site of some of the most famous true crime cases in history. But there's more than meets the eye to the crime in California. Join Sean, Jessica, and Charles on the California True Crime Podcast as they cover crime both infamous and overlooked from around our state, while looking at the deeper history that goes beyond beaches and movie stars.
Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way.
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
We say fuck a
Hey,
lot.
y'all, welcome back to Mountain Murders. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
You may find me a bit off-putting today. I mean, more than usual. I'm battling some kind of funk. It's been hanging around the edges for like a while now, but today I woke up and it's sort of like culminated all the things. Now I'm like coughing and I just don't feel that great. So I apologize ahead of time if I sound froggy.
Yeah.
As you called it, Dylan.
Yes.
Or if I'm a little, not upbeat, the opposite of upbeat.
This poor little thing. She's such a little trooper. She's like, we still got to get this work in, but she does not feel well, and she doesn't look well either.
Yeah, thanks. You've been complimenting me all day by telling me how I look shitty.
No, that's not what I said.
What'd you say then?
I said you look like you don't feel well.
I'm a woman, and I can read between the lines. You're telling me I look like a piece of shit.
Is that how that works?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks so much for that. You're a really loving, supportive husband.
No, I would never, and I will do everything to support you in this time of need.
Again, I can read between the lines, okay? I know what you mean.
All right, but we are back with the second part of the...
Beltway Sniper case?
Yes. I think that's what it is.
Dylan, this case has so much information, and as I've been researching and combing through multiple books, newspaper articles, interviews, we're not going to conclude the case today. This is part 2, but we're definitely going to have a part 3.
Wow, so much stuff.
It really is, and I've learned a lot of information and details that I just did not realize or know beforehand. So I learned a little something, and hopefully I'm passing on more information to my listeners.
Oh, I'm sure you will. But before we get started, I need to thank today's sponsor of the show, Mallory, who sponsored us over there on Patreon. Thank you so much for your support.
Patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast, where you can find ad-free episodes, bonus material,
loads of extra content.
Oh, man, we have 6 years of podcasting right there on Patreon.
We do.
It's a lot of stuff, Dylan.
It is a lot of stuff indeed. So let's dive straight in, Heather, and get some more info in our brain.
Let's do it. 72-year-old Pascal Charlot was born April 20th of 1930 in Haiti. In 1964, he immigrated to the United States, settling in the Petworth neighborhood of Washington, D.C. with his wife and 5 children. A carpenter by trade and also a handyman, Charlot was a respected leader of the Haitian community. He was known for his flowers and vegetable gardens. He took time to tend to the tomatoes and peppers. Dorielle Charlot, Pascal's wife, was battling Alzheimer's. He was Dorielle's primary caregiver. Around the neighborhood, Pascal was known to pick up neighbors' newspapers or carry in their garbage cans. His favorite expression was, quote, "Let me help you with that."
Oh, wow.
He played lotto and loved sitting on his porch in the mornings reading the newspaper. Pascal didn't have a car, so he walked or used public transportation to get around the bustling city. On October 3rd of 2002, Pascal prepared dinner for his wife, then walked out of their home on Georgia Avenue Northwest with plans to pick up a prescription for Doriel at a nearby pharmacy. It was 9:15 p.m. when Pascal was felled by a single bullet.
You know, it seems like all these victims are just like really good people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just, what are the odds? And it seems a lot of times, it seems like the murder victims are just good people who had something to add. They added value to their community.
Yes.
In many different ways.
They're people who definitely did not deserve what happened to them. And it seems like the victims of these random shootings exemplify that.
Right.
I mean, these are not criminals. They're not terrible people. They're not out wreaking havoc, not putting themselves in high-risk situations.
Yeah, they're just everyday people.
Everyday, average, normal citizens, folks like you or me, going about their business, and they lead good lives. They're good people. You know, they're loving family members. They are good friends, good neighbors.
Right.
Witnesses who heard the shot said it appeared to have come from the 1100 block of Calmia Road Northwest, across from where Charlot was shot. One witness described seeing a dark-colored, older model Chevrolet Caprice, possibly burgundy or brown, with tinted windows at the scene. Another witness said the car was, quote, American-made, big, police-looking car, square-shaped and dark in color. The second witness had seen the vehicle parked along the 7800 block of Georgia Avenue Northwest. Then about 10 minutes later, they heard a single gunshot. The car pulled away, lights off, traveling toward Calmia Road. At 10:14 p.m., a Prince George's County police officer ran the New Jersey plates of a rattletrap 1990 blue Chevy Caprice. All clean. The cop let the car go, and the Caprice vanished once again into the night.
Oh, my gosh.
Chief Charles Moose held the first press conference of October 4th, 2002 at 6:35 a.m. Moose and detectives had worked the previous day and into the night with ATF ballistic specialists, trying to learn as much as they could about the shootings, to include the weapon that was being used. They needed answers, but all they had were questions. Lots of questions. In less than 24 hours, the shootings had sent a tsunami of fear through the sprawl of Washington suburbs, which spanned hundreds of miles. No one was safe from the marksman, a faceless predator who continued to stalk and kill prey. Often, small law enforcement agencies do not want to get in bed with the feds, so to speak. Federal agencies had a certain reputation, often well-earned, for pushing around local agencies on major criminal investigations. However, Chief Moose and detectives were eager to work with the ATF.
Well, yeah, but I think that's because they're already feeling overwhelmed. This has all happened very quickly. It's a lot going on, all these different scenes. So their resources are already taxed in a very short period of time.
Examining the few clues they had to work with, recovered bullet fragments from a few bodies, as well as entry and exit wounds on the victims, Moose's detectives and the ATF specialists determined the shots came from a high-velocity round, from an assault rifle or a hunting type of weapon. It didn't really narrow anything down, but it was something to go on. Moose considered that giving the information to the press might generate a lead. Perhaps a hunting rifle missing from a family gun cabinet, or a dealer who'd sold a weapon to a suspicious client recently. Privately, investigators were not so hopeful. Ballistics evidence from the first three shootings were inconclusive. The ATF concluded fragments from the other shootings seemed to be fired from the same weapon, although they could not yet fix on what specific weapon. Chief Moose told the press, quote, "We're dealing with someone shooting from a distance, someone using a high-velocity round. We are 90% sure that it is a .223 round from a rifle, a hunting rifle, an assault rifle." The .223 is small and fast and can travel about 3,000 feet per second. When the bullet hits human flesh, They're designed to expand and fragment.
Oh my gosh, to create the most damage, I would think.
Well, that's why the damage is so severe, Dylan. With a sniper's choice of ammo and targeting the head and chest, victims had little chance of survival. The ATF experts estimated the shots had been fired from a Colt AR-15, the semi-automatic civilian version of the military M16 assault rifle, which is known to be able to rip through body armor. Frightening.
Well, yeah, you're having literally weapons of war being used in a civilian setting.
And I know there's a lot of argument among, gun advocates and I guess you call them anti-gun advocates, right? About the AR-15 because it is such a high-powered military-style weapon. A lot of folks think these weapons should not be readily available, should not be on the streets. People should not be able to just go purchase these kinds of weapons. But then, of course, other folks are like, I'm a hunter, or there are reasons why I should be able to own this weapon for home protection, that kind of thing.
Well, and other folks would say if that weapon wasn't available, someone would just use another weapon. I mean, in areas where there aren't many guns available, you have people walk into, public settings and stab a bunch of people to death. So, I mean...
Or drive a car.
Or drive a car, which happened recently in New Orleans.
Or take an axe and start attacking random people.
Yeah, or a bat or whatever.
I mean, bad people are going to do bad regardless of whatever is available to them.
Right.
They have bad intentions on the brain, and they're going to utilize whatever is available, whether it's a gun, a knife, whatever.
Right. Some people would argue that it's not the weapon, it's the person. And if the person's going to act out, they're going to do it in any capacity that they can. But you could go back and forth on that discussion for 5 hours.
Exactly. And, I'm an A2 supporter. I am, military, veteran. My family are country folk. They hunt, they fish. And I've been around guns my whole life. But on the same side of that, the thought of a weapon, this kind of weapon, just in the hands of anyone out there is kind of scary.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it is such a powerful gun. And it can do such damage. Like the most damage.
Well, it's made to kill people. I mean, it's made to do that at the most efficient in the most efficient manner, right?
So what you're saying, Dylan, is made to fuck shit up.
Well, yeah.
Since we say fuck a lot.
It is made to fuck shit up.
I had to throw a fuck out there.
And
it's been a minute.
But I mean, that's the reason that is such a emotional conversation on about guns. And of course, you could go back and forth all day about that. But in this situation, I guess you can kind of see what kind of damage could be done.
Well, yeah, and I guess that was really my point, is not so much to get into the debate about guns, but just when you are utilizing this kind of weapon in this type of situation, I mean, it really is causing maximum damage, and victims really don't stand any kind of chance to survive.
Right.
When it's expanding and fragmenting. I mean, if you're shot with this, even if it's not in the head, you're shot in the stomach, or this is designed to fuck shit up. It's going to tear through organs.
That's why you get a small entry wound and a really large exit wound.
It's just bad.
And it's making the forensics and all the tools that police use to fight something like this, it's making that hard for them to use because of that very thing, the fragmenting. They're not even sure of the round 100%.
Moose pled with the public to utilize the tip line. He knew the community was edgy and nervous. School was set to start soon. No plans had been made to shut down the schools yet. Law enforcement were out at the various schools across the area, and he told reporters to expect an 8 a.m. update. All the federal agencies had offered help from day one: the FBI, the ATF, U.S. Marshals, and Secret Service. Soon, specialists from the CIA would pitch in to help. The DEA and U.S. Customs would also engage in the investigation. The Pentagon would provide a special surveillance craft to track suspicious vehicles on the highway. I mean, this was really turning into an all-hands effort. The FBI would play a key role. So they had this unique software, Dylan, that could manage multiple leads in complex investigations, and it was called Rapid Start. It was used in major cases like the Oklahoma City bombing. to the World Trade Center attacks. Although by today's standards, it's not the ideal system, it was still light years beyond what small law enforcement departments were using back in 2002. Gary Bald with the Baltimore FBI's field office in Baltimore authorized its immediate use. He felt it was the only thing tailor-made to this kind of task and that it was, quote, the tool of choice. The investigation might be moving slow, but it was getting bigger by the minute. With so little to go on, the ballistics issues were critical. The ATF's top forensic lab happened to be located in Rockville, Maryland, and was at Chief Moose's disposal. They focused on trajectory analysis to determine where the shooter had been by gauging the bullet's path. It was considered part art, part science. And how lucky to have that lab so close by.
Yeah, I mean, that's just pure luck.
That's like a saving grace in this
But
case.
a very valuable tool for them.
Special trained dogs were brought in to locate shell casings at the scenes. These lab dogs were highly trained, very proficient at finding gunpowder residue and spent shell casings. Having federal agents with dogs was more addition to this growing team that was working tirelessly to solve the case. Later that night, the ATF would conclusively link the shooting of Pascal Charlot to the same gun that had killed the Montgomery County victims. Around 2:30 p.m., 44-year-old Caroline Sewall, a mother of two, was loading Halloween decorations into her minivan outside a Michael's craft store in Spotsylvania County, Virginia. In an instant, a bullet ripped into the lower right of her back, then came out under her left breast and lodged into the back of the minivan.
Oh, my God.
A military-style Black Hawk helicopter was on call during that time. Soon the chopper had one of Moose's detectives on the scene, nearly 65 miles away from Montgomery County. But at the time, the officer was thinking, like, what are we going to do? Take the sniper out with a rocket?
Yeah.
Finally, a lucky break. So the woman who was shot not only survived, but was expected to make a full recovery. At the time, her identity wasn't released to the public for privacy reasons, but since Mrs. Sewall has participated in interviews about the incident. The bullet was recovered from inside the van and taken to the Rockville lab. It was conclusively linked to the shootings in Montgomery County and in Washington, D.C. So finally, they had some hard evidence to work with. Can you imagine this poor woman?
No.
And what's their problem? What do they have got against the Michael's craft store?
That's what I was going to say. They're it's like they don't want anybody to go to Michael's and enjoy themselves.
They don't want anybody to have a hobby.
Yeah.
Okay? Put the yarn down. No acrylic paint for you.
Step away from the really cute cat toys.
You're just getting some Halloween decorations and then all of a sudden you're blasted in this public shopping
I couldn't imagine.
It's fucking scary.
No, yeah. All of a sudden, you don't even, this type of thing, you don't even know what's happening to you. You don't even know all you know is you've been incapacitated and now you're like pouring blood everywhere.
Spotsylvania County, specifically Fredericksburg, was not as crowded as Montgomery County. Although it was increasingly growing, it was still considered generally quiet and even kind of rural at this time. The community had about 98,000 residents, and with that brought 2 homicides a year on average. And these were limited to like domestic abuse issues and or like drug deals gone wrong.
Okay.
So not a lot of crime in this area. Just a few months earlier, the Spotsylvania County Sheriff's Office had solved the murders of 3 teenage girls at the hands of serial killer Mark Evenitz, a case which we had covered some years back. So again, you got this really small sheriff's office. They don't get a lot of murders, not a lot of major crimes like this. They were just solving a cold case after 16 years. And then now you've got this happening. I mean, they're probably like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Right?
They don't know what to do.
So during the 16-year fight to solve the 3 cold cases, the small law enforcement agency had learned an important lesson, which was never give up. The agency was no stranger to working with the FBI, having done so to solve the serial killer case. It became painfully obvious to everyone that the shooter was expanding their territory. Yet another lead came in from an eyewitness at the Fredericksburg shooting. A dark color, older model Chevrolet car was seen driving away from the Spotsylvania Mall near the Michaels Craft Store.
Now, there have been multiple sightings of this older police-style, older American car at these scenes. So I'm wondering if they're really going to start dialing up on this being our vehicle.
We're going to get to that. It was the same description given at the previous night's shooting on Georgia Avenue Northwest in Washington, D.C. at the Pascal Charlot scene. Yet everyone was still looking for a white box truck or white van.
Damn it.
I know. Chief Moose will later be asked if chasing the white box truck was a mistake. He will reiterate his opinion that, quote, no lead is a mistake. He explained that law enforcement's job is to chase down clues all the time. That's what they pay us for. And until they can chase down a lead and rule it out, then it's not really a waste of time.
Well, and that's a good point.
And that makes sense.
Yeah.
The Maryland State Police's Criminal Investigation Division had been following a right-wing militia group suspected of several robberies near where the first shootings had occurred in Montgomery County. An informant said a militia member was angry at Washington and had recently talked about killing people. The suspect drove a white van and had been trying to buy a .223 rifle recently. He had also had some sort of connection to Timothy McVeigh.
Oh, God.
Law enforcement was kind of eager to, get this guy in the hot seat. Was this the guy? He kind of fit all the check marks.
Oh, I'm sure this was piquing their interest for certain. Because, you're hearing things like McVeigh, militia connections, blah, 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 and some kind of misplaced anger against the government or whatever.
I should also mention this. It wasn't really part of my, story notes, but I just thought it was something kind of interesting, touching. During the investigation, there was a man who was going around handing out plates of food and making sure all of the investigators, the feds, everyone was eating. He would ask them, have you had something to eat? Have you had something to drink? And was just kind of taking care of everybody. He would hand them plates of chicken wings, mac and cheese, pizza, potato salad, just really kind of taking care of everyone. And many of these feds later learned it was Chief Moose.
Really?
So during this, even though he's got all this shitstorm happening around him, he is so concerned about the people working the case that he is going around making sure everybody has what they need, that people are eating, that they're getting enough fluids, that they're able to take some time and have a little bit of a rest, and that they're caring for themselves.
Well, and I think that speaks to his character.
I do too. To me, that's a true leader right there. So not long after Chief Moose set up that command center, remember we had that mobile command center and everything was going wrong with it, losing power, no AC, just everything that could go wrong with it. So they finally get that up and running, and then they realize it's not enough space to accommodate the rapidly growing number of agents assisting with the case. They quickly outgrew it. An office building was located across the street from the mobile command center where they would be able to set up. An FBI agent was able to get financial approval to lease the office space and get the needed equipment delivered fast. They took over 3 sections of this building, allowing for hundreds of people to work round the clock. And this is precisely what they did. With so little to go on, often the leads came up dead ends. The tip line was ringing constantly, and no one wanted to just sit around waiting on the right call to come in. Some agents began reviewing gun purchases for rifles that used .223 caliber ammo, focusing on the hunting and target rifles. They checked arrest records of the owners of these weapons. More than 50 ATF investigators knocked on doors of several hundred gun dealers around Maryland and Virginia to ask if anyone had purchased .223 ammo for a rifle or if anyone had been acting strangely. It was a shot in the dark, no pun intended, because 223 ammo, Dylan. The .223 ammo is a very common round sold.
Oh, okay.
There were 60 gun dealers alone in Montgomery County. Everyone was cooperative. They disclosed who had bought rifles that could fire that kind of bullet, but there were 30 different guns that fit the bill. So it was like a needle in a haystack.
So it's making it But this just shows you the kind of manpower and resources they're using in this investigation. And they got that very quickly.
Yes. By the end of the weekend, the tip line had logged 4,000 calls. Investigators considered there were probably maybe 800 good tips from those calls. So again, it's having to, kind of weed through and sniff out the good versus the crap.
And once you get 800 good, you have to actually go work those leads.
Yeah. Some of the calls were divorce and custody disputes. Ex-wives calling to report their former husbands were, quote, gun nuts.
And this happens no matter the investigation. Once it goes to the public, you have people trying to get back at each other. And it always kind of tickles me. And it's like, well, I don't know. They were mean to me, so maybe they're your killer, And but it's kind of a shitty thing to do if unless you have a good reason to be calling. It's if you're just doing it to give someone a hard time, you're wasting resources that need to be going to something else.
But through checking these tips and the gun purchases, law enforcement found a lot of people who legally shouldn't be owning firearms and were able to get those guns off the streets. One reason investigators stayed so focused on the white box truck or van was because so many tips came in about them. Yet you couldn't drive a half a mile down an area road without passing 3 to 4 of these types of vehicles. I mean, they were everywhere.
Right.
So statistically, it's no wonder that witnesses would say, I saw a box truck at the scene, because they were every fucking where.
Because there likely was a box truck at the scene.
Yeah. Still, some tips got more attention than others. On Saturday morning, a caller desperately had tried getting through on the tip line to report having seen a white box truck at the mobile station on Thursday. He had heard the gunshot and left the area in a hurry, scared. The truck he had spotted was parked across the street on Connecticut Avenue, just beyond where Prem Kumar Wallaker's taxicab was parked. The caller noticed a man walking toward the truck quickly after he heard the gunshot. Security footage from surrounding businesses was being reviewed, but with little luck. They also needed more backup. They had all the stuff they needed to do, all these tips they needed to look into, security footage that had to be reviewed, knocking on the door of these gun owners, checking people's backgrounds. I mean, you have to have bodies,
right,
to be able to do that. This kind of investigation cannot be left to 2 people, right?
No.
And on top of it, they're working in these like 24-hour shifts, and at some point, people need to sleep. They need to shower.
Yeah, and when the initial adrenaline wears off, you start to wind down or grind down very quickly in a situation like this.
Yeah, and I think everybody recognized they needed a battle plan. The ATF would bring in 125 more agents, booking blocks of motel rooms around Rockville, Maryland. By the end of the investigation, the ATF would have 655 agents in the Washington area working the case. They were divided into different groups. You had leads, intelligence, and surveillance. It was all a blur. After the shooting in Spotsylvania County, there was no telling where the shooter would strike next. The ATF notified their southern office in North Carolina just in case the shooter decided to travel further south. Yet the North Carolina Highway Patrol broadcast the ATF bulletin, which leaked to the Raleigh News and Observer. Around midnight, national news agencies like CNN and Fox News came a-calling. There had been a 33-year-old man from Rockville that was included in this bulletin as he had been reported missing, according to his family, and had access to guns. So the ATF agents were concerned that this could go very badly. They remembered Richard Jewell, the security guard whose life was wrongly upended after the Atlanta Olympic bombing in 1996. It was a stark reminder of what can happen.
Yeah, because that went very bad.
Yeah. So the ATF had to let the media know this man was not a suspect and had never been. Someone's life could be ruined by such allegations and for no reason. They just hear, hey, this guy's missing, and then automatically all the news agencies want to report this guy's the suspect.
Well, everybody's trying to, break the news before their competitors, and that's how you end up in a situation like this. But I do think it was big of them with all this other stuff going on to get out ahead of that and try to make sure that didn't turn into something that affected someone badly.
The man had been found in Fairfax, Virginia. Chief Moose reiterated at a press conference that the man was not a suspect and should be left alone. The reporters were already camping out on this person's lawn. Moose again reminded parents that area agencies were making their best efforts to have officers in the schools. So on Monday, October 7th, the day began like any other regular morning. Things seemed to go off without a hitch. Kids are arriving at school. There hasn't been a shooting. All is calm for the time being. And then around 8:09 a.m., the sniper struck again. A 13-year-old boy named Iran Brown lay writhing on the ground outside of Benjamin Tasker Middle School in Bowie, Maryland, crying frantically for his aunt. He screamed, "Aunt Tanya, I've been shot."
Oh my gosh.
Tanya Brown happened to look in the rearview mirror as she was pulling away from the school. A nurse at the Children's Hospital in Washington, she saw that her nephew was on the ground bleeding. She dialed 911, got him into the car, and battled rush hour traffic. With no help in sight, she drove him to the urgent care clinic at Bowie Health Center. The color was draining from his face, and the boy was struggling to breathe. He told her, "I love you," and she knew he was dying. But she told him, "You're going to be okay."
Oh my gosh.
I mean, this woman was like driving like hell trying to get through DC traffic, and anybody who's ever been on the Beltway knows what DC traffic is like. It is bumper to bumper. It's 6 lanes of just nonstop gridlock. And this poor woman is trying her damnedest to get this kid to safety, to get him some medical care.
That's terrible.
At this clinic, the medical team was able to stabilize Iran, but he needed more help than what they could provide. The bullet had ripped through the child's small body, tearing through a lung, his spleen, stomach, diaphragm, pancreas, and liver. He was airlifted to the Children's Hospital. The surgeon worked on Iran Brown for hours. It was a real touch-and-go situation. Chief Moose, with tears in his eyes, told reporters, quote, "Someone is so mean-spirited that they shot a child. Now we're stepping over the line because our children don't deserve this. Shooting a kid, I guess it's getting really, really personal now." The entire region was traumatized. Schools went into code blue again, canceling outdoor activities, field trips, even afternoon kindergarten classes. The next day, helicopters whirled overhead as parents escorted their children into school, cops standing guard all around school buildings across the region. The whole thing was surreal as parents warned their children to, quote, "Be careful, be alert, pay attention," instead of the usual, "Have a good day."
This is true terror.
Tensions escalated when a strange clue was found outside the middle school in Bowie, Maryland, where Brown had been shot. A tarot card, the death card, was discovered with a handwritten message. Chilling, the message said, quote, "Dear policeman, I am God."
Wow.
The card, along with a spent shell casing, was found about 150 yards from the school's entrance. The tarot card was first reported by WUSA Channel 9. The Washington Post reported on it in Wednesday's edition. Detectives feared the leak would harm the investigation. They had hoped to develop some type of relationship with the shooter so they might be able to communicate with him. And the card also had a note saying, like, not to share this with the media.
And so before they even get a chance, it's already been shared to the media.
Someone has leaked it, yeah. Chief Moose ripped into the media. He said, quote, "I have not received any messages that the citizens of Montgomery County want Channel 9 or the Washington Post or any other media to solve this case." He threatened to turn the case over to the media so they could solve it.
Gosh.
He was pissed. He was not only admonishing the media, but also letting the shooter know he had not released the information to the press. The card had contained a note saying, "Don't release this information to the press." Moose had established a reputation as professional and results-oriented, but you got to consider by now he's exhausted and understandably drained. Others who knew Moose said the public actually saw a true picture of who he was, that he had these kind of explosive moments of anger sometimes, but he wasn't a proud or boastful type of person. Despite his outburst, Moose had a good heart and cared about the community deeply. Clearly, the victims and their families weighed on this man's heart. The shooting of Iran Brown had been exceptionally emotional for him. And I think sometimes, Dylan, we forget that law enforcement are human beings too, and they have feelings just like the rest of us. I mean, they're not machines.
Yeah, I think we do truly forget that sometimes. You know, when people's like, well, why didn't cops do this? Or why didn't investigators do this and that? They're just people too with lives, families.
And they are
worries.
called upon to act in a split second, something that is kind of like, you know, hey, I'm an officer, but my life is on the line. I have to react in the situation. And then later they're questioned about it. But how would you handle if you were in? And so I kind of see Chief Moose's point yelling at the media because they're so quick and like bloodthirsty. If it bleeds, it leads to get this headline that they are willing to sacrifice the case or the investigation just to get a headline printed.
Well,
and I think that's dangerous. And I understand the job of newspaper reporters. I mean, I've been a reporter. I get it. But at the same time, there needs to be some sort of mutual respect in maintaining the integrity of a case.
Yeah, and a lot of times the media doesn't seem to respect that in the least bit.
No, they just go off half-cocked.
They go off
half-cocked
half-cocked.
About how detrimental it could be to solving a case.
And what are they really doing at the end of the day? Yes, they're informing the public in ways.
But what did that tarot card what did that bring to the public?
It didn't help. It didn't really help the public any at all. And that could be one of those things that cops, the investigators keep closer to the vest. So they start weeding out copycats or, you know, lunatics claiming they're the killer when they're really not. I mean, these are very important pieces of the investigation.
Yeah, I agree.
The public knowing about it is only satisfying that salacious, BS part of public, need to be informed. It really does, at the end of the day, doesn't help anything.
No, it was not really adding to the situation.
It's just something to talk about.
Yeah, it's, again, something to get ratings, something to sell newspapers. Chief Moose implored parents to have careful but honest conversations with their children about what was happening. He felt it was important that young people hear it from their loved ones, and that parents should let them know in a way that would make sense to kids, but also let them know they're safe at home and that they're loved. Moose said, quote, "It does remind us of the things we find special in life during times like this." On Saturday, October 5th, the FBI had let Moose know they had the full backing of the Bureau and that more agents were on their way. They had every available resource to aid in solving the case. So, again, back to, just before this young boy was shot, you have all these federal agencies stepping up, which is really important to be able to offer those resources.
Yeah, and everybody seems to be cooperating. Nobody's worried about jurisdiction or anything dumb like that.
And though everyone is offering up their help, Chief Moose held his ground with the federal agencies to let them know the case belonged to the local agencies. He would remain the lead jurisdiction on the cases, which he said were, quote, local homicides. He was drawing a line and letting the local agencies know they're still in charge.
And I think that's important in a situation like this.
Chief Moose and his wife Sandy were slated to attend an annual gathering of International Associations of Chiefs of Police in Minneapolis, Minnesota, but had to cancel the event. With the shooting of 13-year-old Iran Brown, the whole dynamic changed. Now they were dealing with multiple shootings in multiple jurisdictions. Law enforcement was carefully trying to figure out a way to establish a dialogue with the shooter. When Maryland's Governor Glendening took to the news to call the shooter a coward, there were a lot of concerns among law enforcement. Law enforcement wanted to speak as one and have sort of a central tone to the case and have this sort of united front. Anything anyone did to impede the investigation of the shootings or delay apprehension was intolerable. And the fact that they are really trying to kind of maintain this certain level of, professionalism.
Right.
When discussing the shooter, they felt completely undermined having the governor come in and call this guy a coward because they felt like all that it was going to do was rile up the shooter
and make him strike out
angry,
again. Yeah.
Make him strike out, and then he wouldn't have any kind of level of trust or communication with law enforcement.
Well, again, that's one of those situations. There's nothing to be gained there.
No.
Only bad things could happen from that.
Around 9:15 p.m. on Monday, October 7th, just hours after Iran Brown was shot, Holly Thompson and Marty Ruby were closing up a Subway sandwich shop in Baltimore's Remington neighborhood. A tall black man in shorts and t-shirt walked in. Thompson told him they were closing for the night. About 15 minutes later, as the women were locking the doors, the man stepped out of the shadows. He apologized if he, quote, scared the women, and asked if he could park in their lot and rest for a bit. He told the women that he had been driving all night and was beat. Marty Ruby told him he could stay for a while, but to not leave the car all night in the parking lot because police would probably hassle him. The beat-up car had a light glowing from inside, and at first the women thought there was a television on, but then realized it was the glow of a laptop. They noted the car looked like a total mess. There were boxes and clothes kind of jammed inside. Thompson would later tell police, quote, the car looked like someone was living in it. The women noted the man was not from Baltimore, but he was polite. He looked exhausted, but not disheveled. He asked where he might find a hot meal nearby, and they suggested a 7-Eleven around the corner. Not long after midnight, the man entered a mobile gas station where Marty Ruby's sister, Holly Holmes, was working. He again inquired about getting hot food. She told him they didn't sell any hot food at the mobile, but that he could try the 7-Eleven. So he leaves, and then he comes back in later to buy a drink and a couple of snacks from her. About 30 minutes after that, so now, it's like 12:30, nearing 1 o'clock in the morning, a Baltimore policeman passed by, and as usual, he waved to Holmes behind the counter at the gas station. This was kind of their usual signal that all was well. That's when he noticed this beat-up Chevy Caprice parked in the Subway parking lot. Around 3 a.m., he made another round, and the car was still parked in the lot. He noticed the windows were fogged, so he knew someone was inside the vehicle. He ran the New Jersey plate, and it came back clean. However, this officer's spidey senses told him that something was not right and that he should investigate anyway. There was just something off about this car, which seems to be the case with multiple officers. They keep pulling this car over. It's like everyone's getting not a good feeling about this vehicle.
Well, when you see a car beat all to hell, really dirty, piled full of stuff, it catches people's eyes.
The officer found the man inside the car was sleeping. His name was John Allen Muhammed, and he handed over a Washington state driver's license. He was wanted on a shoplifting complaint in Tacoma, but that didn't turn up in the computer check. Law enforcement don't usually enter petty crimes into national criminal databases. Muhammad said he was traveling from Virginia to New Jersey to visit his father and had stopped to sleep in the parking lot. He then asked the officer how to get back on I-95 and drove away. Several hours after Iran Brown was shot, a caller from Prince George's County phoned to say he'd received a message Sunday night from a friend who was described as being mentally unwell, claiming to be the shooter. The man lived within 3 miles of the middle school and had a slew of rifles. This man also hated cops. Another witness had heard the shot at the school and had followed a vehicle. So it turns out it was this guy who had made this threat to his friend or claimed I did this or whatever.
Oh, okay.
Happened to be the same car owned by the same guy. So police set up a surveillance perimeter and watched the man's house. Armed with a search warrant, his apartment was swarmed, yet law enforcement found receipts that would have made it nearly impossible for this man to commit the crimes. There was no proof he had been the sniper, and actually the opposite, because they found alibis all around his apartment. So again, it's just another one of these leads that goes nowhere. And, every tip the officers get, they're pretty pumped, and then it's just sort of immediately deflated.
Right. They're just hoping to break something on this case to have some tangible evidence point towards someone, just anything besides this not knowing any solid information.
And Dylan, tips came in from everywhere. Some were heartbreaking. A father reporting his son. A woman thought it might be her boyfriend. A minister convinced his son-in-law was the sniper. This minister said his son-in-law had a military background as a trained sniper. He had lost his job and owned 2 white vans. He lived in Northern Virginia but had worked as a delivery driver that had taken him all over Maryland and that he knew Montgomery County like the back of his hand.
Oh. So he's just sure that his son-in-law is the sniper.
Yeah, but again, you've got like families turning on each other. I mean, everyone's kind of being eyed suspiciously.
Right. Lots of side eye.
A father turning in his own son. I mean, that's not okay, right?
No, it's very sad. And to these people who start really strongly suspecting someone they know and love, that's got to be emotionally very, very damaging for them.
But every tip, like I said, Dylan would get officers pumped. The hours were long, the coffee was strong, and the officers, they missed their families. But everyone from the beat cops to the federal agents were so desperate to catch this gunman. One agent described it as, quote, being kicked in the stomach to have a hot lead that fizzled within moments of investigating it.
Oh.
Cops, FBI snipers, they were out everywhere stalking out possible locations like strip malls and gas stations. They didn't find the shooter, but all the attention seemed to draw out what would be called nut jobs from the woodwork, which I think you get that in big cases. People
You do.
just wanting some attention.
You do?
I'm going to tell you a few examples of those, Dylan. The day after Iran Brown's shooting, a man was located in a white van in Aspen Hill near the Michael's Craft Store where that very first shot had been fired. The man was ranting about protecting children. Inside his van, officers located firearms, and at his house, they found several banned assault rifles.
Oh.
So he was locked up. In Kensington, a call came in about a man who often acted erratically. This man apparently had a history of like mental illness. But neighbors reported hearing loud noises coming from his property. When officers approached the front door, they heard these noises too. The guy had lots of weapons in the house and had been shooting at a wall inside his home.
Oh, my God.
His guns were seized and the man was admitted to a mental health facility. Within days of Iran Brown's shooting, 6,025 calls came into the tip line.
Damn. I mean, just how do you even approach all that information?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you've got like, probably 15,000, 20,000 calls that have come in over the course of these days.
Right.
This is where the FBI's rapid start system would come into play. Every call that came in would be logged into the system. They would be determined to be low or high priority. But for all the hot leads, there were missed opportunities. Like the Caprice with New Jersey tags stopped near the scene of the Pascal Charlot murder and eyewitnesses placing it in Spotsylvania County. Those leads were missed. They seem to be marked as low priority and just slipped on by.
Damn, that's the problem when you have so much information.
John Muhammad's tags would be checked at least 9 times in October. So let's talk about John Allen Muhammed. He was born on December 31st of 1960 as John Allen Williams in New Orleans, Louisiana. His father, Ernest, was a Pullman porter, and his wife, Murtis, was a frail woman who would die from cancer only 3 years after John was born. Ernest then disappeared, leaving John to be raised by his domineering grandfather, who doled out physical punishments regularly. Ernest was not present in his son's life. Over the years, John would see the man, who almost looked like a white man, cooking on a grill in that neighborhood, and John would tell his cousins, quote, "That's my daddy."
Damn, that's kind of messed up.
John and his 4 siblings grew up in Scotlandville, a pocket of northwest Baton Rouge. It was an insular black community along the banks of the Mississippi where money was scarce, but the neighborhood abounded with love and care. One kid who grew up there said, quote, "We were poor, but we didn't know we were poor." The kids played in a 4-block area known as the Field in the shadow of oil refineries. The schools were poor and ill-equipped, but there was so much love in the community. Everyone attended church on Sundays, and the kids played for hours riding bikes and hanging out. Like everyone in the neighborhood's looking out for these kids. They kind of went from house to house, bumming drinks and snacks throughout the day. The kids were like everybody's kids.
When someone says something like, "We were poor, but we didn't know we were poor," and that goes to speak on the entire neighborhood you're living in. Everybody's kind of in the same boat as you. So everyone you know lives similarly, right?
Yeah.
And so you don't know that there's differences. Which I find interesting when someone comes up like that.
Yeah, I know. I've talked like...
I mean, are you poor until someone calls you poor?
Yeah, right.
I mean, what is poor,
Well,
really?
Being a kid and growing up, I remember having conversations with my mama, my great-grandma, about her time. She was an Appalachian woman, grew up in the country, farmed her whole life and that kind of thing. And I remember asking her questions about, like what was it like to be alive during the Great Depression? You were very young during that time, but like, did you know like how bad it was? And she was like, we was just poor. So poor was poor. Like,
didn't really
to
notice.
us, she's like, we didn't know there was a difference because we was always poor.
Right. These people raised their own meat, grew their own gardens. They've been doing that. So when things start getting bad, as far as
every day was an act of survival for them.
So when the economy tanked for everyone else, they really didn't notice.
No, it didn't really affect them because
they were already at the very bottom level,
fighting for survival. So Grandpa, John Williams' grandpa, they called him Crop Pa, and I don't know what that. Why?
Crop Pa?
Crop Pa.
Oh, Crock Pa?
Crop. C-R-O-P.
Okay.
P-A. Crop Pa.
Okay. I'm the father of the crops.
Well, Crop Pa had supervised boys at a reform school, so he was definitely a disciplinarian. John Williams was primarily cared for by two aunts that resided with Crop Pa. One of them was a school teacher, and the other was like a stay-at-home mom. At one point, there had been 11 children living at Crop Pa's house.
Damn.
So multi-generational family unit happening. He was a thundering presence. John's cousin, Edward Holliday, said, quote, "When I was little, I actually thought he was God."
Wow.
Crop Pa didn't put up with anything. He had rules and expectations, and the children were meant to meet them. If not, they got a whooping. A whooping, Dylan. They got whipped.
And that happens.
He didn't approve of any wrongdoing.
So he had he didn't play any games.
There is no room for shenanigans with Crop Pa. He grew a large garden filled with butter beans, okra, peppers, lettuce, tomato, and much, much more. The kids were expected to help weed and harvest the vegetables. If you stayed at Crop Pa's, you were expected to earn your keep. Crop Pa died in 1995 and was estimated to be about 100 years old.
Damn.
When he passed away. John Williams would take his younger cousins to the field to swing. They loved him, and he pushed the swings higher than anyone else. They had little neighborhood gangs that sometimes got into fights. They made go-karts out of 2x4s, bike seats, and lawnmower wheels and would pull each other around the neighborhood. During school, as rough and tumble as it may be, John Williams was known as a peacemaker. He would try to keep people out of trouble. He would mediate fights between neighborhood thugs and football players. He would, quote, talk them down. John was a young man with an extraordinary moral compass and a sense of right and wrong. People considered him to be a good and decent kid, according to, those who grew up with him. He wasn't a very outgoing student in high school and not that popular. He was tall, slender, and remembered as a sharp dresser. He also played on the school's tennis team. And though he was a loner, Williams didn't mind pitching in to help out others. College wasn't an option for John Williams. The family, again, poor. He signed up for welding at a trade school and did that for several years. He then joined the Louisiana National Guard, where Williams showed a lot of pride. He was very dedicated, kept a meticulous uniform, and showed up on time for the early morning musters. It was in the Guard that Williams seemed to discover himself. He took advantage of the different programs, taking advanced engineering courses and learning about firearms. Williams served in the Guard until 1985. In 1982, he got into trouble for disobeying an NCO and failed to show up for a police post on duty. And he had another issue in April of 1983 when he was fined for assaulting an NCO, which, by the way, is a non-commissioned officer.
Oh, okay.
So it's just like a senior enlisted person. He was sentenced to 7 days confinement, but didn't actually have to serve any of that. So we're already starting to see maybe some cracks in John Williams's personality.
Right.
John Williams was considered handsome and never had trouble attracting the ladies. Something you know all about, Dylan.
That's not true.
You ladies, man. One of his girlfriends became pregnant with their son, Travis. His relatives were surprised when, out of the blue, he married a girl named Carol Caglier on November 23rd of 1981. Carol was considered a knockout, but John had like multiple girlfriends, so they were sort of surprised when this is the one he marries.
Damn, so
it hadn't even seemed like maybe that serious.
he found the one for him.
Maybe for a period.
Huh.
Their courtship was short, and they moved into a trailer after the marriage. They had a son named Lindbergh, who was born in October of 1982. In 1985, John and Carol separated. Carol accused John of cheating. She would later tell CNN's Larry King, quote, "He was a man and he liked women." Carol reported in court documents that John had moved in with a woman named Mildred Green while he was still married to her. She reported there had been no abuse in that relationship. On the day he split from his wife, John enlisted in the U.S. Army. It was around that time John, who had grown up in a strict Southern Baptist religion, converted to Islam.
Oh, okay. I was wondering when that came into his life.
In November of 1985, John and Mildred moved to Washington State. John and Carol were granted a divorce in 1988. Both parents were awarded custody of their son Lindbergh, though Carol would retain primary custody since John was in the Army. He was set to pay $265 a month in alimony and $150 a month in child support, which by 1988 standards, that seems like a lot of money.
I was going to say that sounds kind of high.
It's a lot of money. In 1985, John Williams' career opened a new chapter in his life as a combat engineer. He really liked this type of work, Dylan. He built obstacles for crews manning M1A1 Abrams main battle tanks. He laid field mines for infantry and armored units and learned all about demolition work. So just like a day or so after his divorce was finalized, in March of 1988, he married Mildred at Fort Lewis. A year older than John, friends considered Mildred the brains of the operation.
Huh.
She was definitely the smarter of the two, people thought. Soon they had a son named John Jr., born in 1990. About a year later, John Williams was at war. He didn't see any actual combat, but lived under grueling conditions, clearing lines and bulldozing down Iraqi defenses in Kuwait. At first, Williams was considered a model soldier, but soon a darkness reared. Little things set him off, and his fellow soldiers considered him a ticking time bomb. They just did not trust him. And if you're in a foxhole, Dylan, the last thing you want is to be with another soldier that you can't trust.
You got to be able to trust the people around you, right?
Little things soon became bigger things. One morning, a soldier found his tent on fire. Someone had thrown an incendiary grenade in his tent.
Damn.
Williams was immediately suspected and was removed from the unit. He wasn't charged, but his fellow soldiers didn't forget the event. Williams, they all believed, was capable of murder. And they just didn't want to be around him.
Well, I mean, can you blame him if he's really having these behavioral issues?
He returned from war, quote, a different man. His wife said she just did not recognize him at all. He complained nonstop that black soldiers faced discrimination throughout the Army. He told Mildred after the grenade incident they had hogtied him. He said during a gas attack, no one gave him a mask, and that after learning it had been just a drill, John felt embarrassed and humiliated. Mildred would later tell the Washington Post, quote, "I didn't know this man. The one I knew stayed in Saudi Arabia." Williams returned to the U.S. in 1992 after having some minor disciplinary issues. He qualified as a hand grenade expert and an M16 marksmanship expert. But after 9 years in the Army, he had only earned rank of sergeant, which, you know, according to most folks, like, that's a bit of time. He should maybe be a little higher ranked than that.
Right.
So it just goes to show he had a pretty, average record. The couple had two daughters, one born in 1992 and another in 1993. So from 1994 to 1999, the couple lived in a nice middle-class neighborhood south of Tacoma. It was home to many active duty and retired military because it was only a few miles from Fort Lewis and the Air Force Base McCord. For several years, Mildred's aging mother had lived with the family. John and Mildred were members of the Nation of Islam, attending weekly meetings at a mosque in Seattle. Mildred kept the books for a mosque in Tacoma and was also secretary for an Islamic study group. Now, the Nation of Islam, Dylan, was born in the United States during the 1930s. Do you know much about the Nation of Islam?
No, I've heard of it, but I don't know much.
Well, I thought I would share a little information with you guys. It offers a mix of black nationalism and some Islamic doctrine, but traditional Muslims disregard it. Over the years, the organization has garnered its share of controversy, with some members implicated in violence and also for instances of anti-Semitism. It also clashes with other Muslim sects. John Williams seemed to take their teachings to heart, especially the lessons in family values. He was considered a wonderful father, always playing and engaging with the 3 children, and they absolutely adored their father. For a time, the marriage seemed stable and happy. From 1992 to 1999, friends said the Williams were a model family picture. He was very strict with the children, but they were not allowed to roam the neighborhood and had to stay in the direct yard or within like an eye view of the house, which, I mean, I think a lot of parents in later years kind of had that same point of view.
Yeah, it's reasonable for the most part.
But neighbors noted that Mildred stayed indoors and always had a veil over her face and head when she was outside. The females were rarely outdoors, except maybe to check the mail or to like check on the children, which neighbors thought was very strange. It's almost like they were not allowed outside.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's something you're going to notice, right?
Mildred painted an entirely different picture of the family. She said inside the home, things were not good. When John returned from the Gulf War, he would sit for hours on the sofa, doing nothing but staring silently. He insisted everything around the house be executed with military precision, from making the beds to serving meals.
Okay. Now, what would you do if I just sat there and stared off into space for hours on end?
Well, you know me, I'd be fucking with you all the time.
Yeah.
I'd be twerking on you.
Oh, okay.
I'd be like farting on you.
Damn.
Yeah, well, basically the same stuff I do to you now.
Except I'm just not being silent.
I'd be all up in your face, flicking your ear, just being my normal obnoxious self.
Okay.
Tap dancing, singing show tunes.
Well, that's good to know, babe.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to stare off into space, that's your prerogative.
I sit around and stare.
Yeah, you sit and look a lot.
But I don't do it silently.
No, you never stop talking.
Right.
For the most part. Sorry, I had to take a drink. Again, I'm sick. I'm dying over here. John formed a small business. It was kind of like a mobile mechanic service, and Mildred kept the books. Customers were impressed by Williams. He wore surgical gloves when he worked on the cars. Yet the business was going nowhere. There was no money coming in. John was set on projecting an image of success to everybody, even though it seems like he didn't actually want to have to work and do anything.
Oh, he just wanted to look like he's working.
Yes. Within a 6-month period, Dylan, from October of 94 to March of 95, John racked up 10 traffic offenses. He got in trouble for driving without a license, expired tags, negligent driving, speeding, just all sorts of traffic offenses.
That's kind of weird.
In a short period. Mildred said John was highly manipulative and able to pinpoint weaknesses of others and use it against them. Williams then tried to start a martial arts school with another instructor, and they rented a small basement room. He wanted to attract Muslims to go to the school, but had no luck. And within 3 years, the business folded. It's like he wants to own a business, but doesn't actually want to do the work.
Well, I'm saying, so now if you want to cater to Muslims, then that's going to make it a smaller group available. And then Muslims that want to learn martial arts, I got to figure that's even smaller group of the marketplace. It doesn't really make sense to me. It doesn't seem like a viable business.
Yeah. It's like if you wanted to have a Christian-based karate studio. I just don't know how many people are going to be like, yes, karate chopping and Bible study.
Karate chopping for the Lord.
Yeah. Judy chopping for God. In July of 1995, a nasty custody dispute broke out between Williams and his first wife, Carol. So by now, his son Lindbergh was 12 years old and had come to visit him in Tacoma, Washington. John refused to let the boy return to Louisiana. Williams filed papers in court alleging that his ex-wife, Carol, had been physically abusing their son. He claimed the boy had shown up in Tacoma with a bag full of urine-soaked clothing and that Carol hit the child and refused to do the boy's laundry. Lindbergh said he was often forced to sleep in urine-soaked sheets.
Oh, my God.
Carol fought hard, saying John had little contact with their son since leaving Baton Rouge, that he had only seen him, throughout his life for 2 months in 1989, and then in June of 1995 when she allowed the boy to visit Tacoma. So he's not had any part in this boy's life.
So she's saying he couldn't be around to even know what's happening in the boy's life.
Yes. John Williams' brother, Edward, supported Carol, writing an affidavit that John had no relationship with the child and that the abuse allegations were false. Mildred persuaded her husband to allow the child to return to Baton Rouge after the summer break. But afterwards, Mildred said the marriage was not the same. He seemed to have a deep resentment toward her after this. Any shred of normality began to unravel in 1999. The karate school failed. The mobile mechanic business was in the red. Mildred began suspecting her husband was stepping out. Their finances were in turmoil, Dylan. He told her sometimes he recorded their conversations.
Well, that's not weird.
Behaving strangely. He forced Mildred to quit her job as the bookkeeper for the mosque. On September 8th of 1999, Mildred couldn't take it anymore and told John he needed to move out. She filed for divorce on December 29th. But things got worse. John Williams stalked his wife and children. He would break into the house in the middle of the night and watch Mildred sleep.
Oh, damn. That's about as creepy as it gets.
He threatened to destroy her life. Over the course of 5 days, Mildred had to change her telephone number 3 times. He would call the phone company repeatedly to inquire about Mildred's new number. She was afraid of him. He was behaving erratically and making threats each time they spoke. Finally, Mildred filed for a restraining order. It was a few days after this, the landlord called to say that the rent had not been paid. John told Mildred and the landlord he was no longer paying the rent. Mildred, who was not working at the time because, her husband made her quit her job, has no money, and he's refusing to provide any kind of financial support for the family. If you want me gone, then tough. Figure it out.
So he's leaving her in a really bad spot.
Yeah. During a visit, John kept prolonging because she really didn't keep the children from him during this time. She didn't want to have anything to do with them, but she was still allowing him to see their children. So during a visit, John kept prolonging, bringing the kids home. It would, constantly have an excuse. I'm supposed to bring them home at 4, but we're going to go buy some clothes, so it'll be later. And kind of kept putting her off and putting her off. And then he started to ignore Mildred's calls and pages, which is not good.
No, it's not good at all.
She later learned John had cleaned out their children's savings account, which held about $500, and had borrowed $1,000 from a friend. He left Mildred completely penniless. Mildred had no way of knowing, but John had taken their children and fled to Antigua.
Damn.
See, this is the part of the story I did not know. I knew he had a troubled past with his wife, but I did not know all of this.
Damn, where's Antigua at?
The Caribbean.
Okay.
John would later tell court officials that Mildred had consented, saying that she had no longer wanted responsibility for the children and that he could take them. So now her kids are gone. She has no idea where they are. And she's also living in fear of her ex-husband, who's making all these threats and has left her in this just terrible situation. Can you imagine?
No, that's terrible.
This poor woman. Mildred was hospitalized on May 16th and had no idea where her kids were. They'd been gone for months. During the hospital stay, she received a call from John. And this was like the first time she'd heard from him since he had taken the kids, like in February or something. She told him she wanted the children. That's when John hung up and called Mildred's mother to say he was going to kill his ex-wife.
Jesus.
Mildred gave a description to hospital security and was truly afraid that John was going to show up at the hospital and murder her. On June 21st, she was awarded temporary custody of the kids. In October, the divorce was finalized. A protective order was put into place permanently, stating that John had to stay away from his former wife and the 3 children. But again, where are the kids?
Yeah, she doesn't even have the children in her custody.
John had used fake names for the children on immigration paperwork, and they were staying with a friend's cousin. Like a friend from Tacoma had a cousin in Antigua, so they were staying with her. After a few weeks, the woman asked John to leave. She believed he had kidnapped the children. John moved into a house, enrolled the children into primary school, and was often seen playing with them in the schoolyard. He tried to apply for an Antiguan passport, stating that his mother had been from the country, and he even stole a birth certificate to complete the paperwork. And people had no idea where he'd gotten this birth certificate of this woman that he claimed was his mother.
He has no shame.
If he got a passport, he could apply for jobs and benefits, but he had a hard time finding work even with his military resume. Without regular work, Williams began doing shady dealings, like selling forged U.S. travel documents as a way to support himself. He sold about 20 sets of fake documents for $3,000 a pop.
Damn.
Friends said Williams talked about blowing up a bank and also kidnapping the prime minister. Okay.
How do you bring that up in just simple conversation?
That's a really good question. Who just sits around like, we're going to kidnap the prime minister.
You know what I was thinking about doing? Kidnapping the prime minister.
They're going to start playing Frankie Goes to Hollywood Relax.
Yeah.
And that's when they're going to kill the Malaysian prime minister. What is this, like the plot for Zoolander? On March 11th of 2001, John was caught at an airport using fake travel documents. He was trying to travel to the U.S. under the name Dwight Russell. Though he was taken into custody, Williams managed to escape the police station and disappear. On April 14th of 2001, he was arrested in Miami, Florida for trying to use false documents and also helping 2 Jamaican women slip into the United States. In the end, no charges were filed, but Williams had made a blip on the federal law enforcement radar. About 9 days later, he traveled to Tacoma, Washington, and wanted to legally change his name to John Allen Muhammed. By this time, Mildred had called the FBI field office in Baltimore on April 9th to report that her kids, had been kidnapped. She was living in a battered women's shelter under a fake name in Virginia to keep safe. She moved across the United States out of fear.
Because she's terrified of him.
John Allen Muhammed left Antigua on May 31st of 2001 with his 3 children and a 5th traveler named Lindbergh Williams. But this boy's real name was Lee Malvo. And that's where we're going to conclude part 2.
Oh my gosh. Dude, I didn't know he got into all this.
It's a wild story.
He's an international man of craziness.
Yes.
Damn.
He's something else.
It's like, you're doing too much, bud. You're doing way too much. You want everything to be perfect, but it's like you don't want to put, or you want everything exactly your way, but you don't want to put in any effort to achieve goals. You know what I mean? It's like you start these small businesses, but you don't want to put in the work, and it's like he blames his wife for their financial instability when she's the one trying the hardest, it sounds like.
Yes.
None of it makes sense.
No, it's a very dysfunctional situation.
Right.
And I really had no idea. I knew there had been some child custody issues, but I did not know it was to this extent. I did not know that he had taken the children out of the country.
Right.
And that he was committing these kinds of crimes.
Damn.
It's really interesting, Dylan, for me, I guess, to see how his life sort of devolved Like he seemed like he was doing okay, and then all of a sudden it just like drops off
Very quickly.
and devolves and just turns into an absolute shit show.
Well, yeah, even with all the traffic violations, infractions there in a row, it's like he just quit caring.
Yeah, or like he just has a real problem with authority.
Yeah.
Like, fuck the system. I'm not gonna, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me.
Yeah.
Like he listened to Rage Against the Machine one too many times.
Well, I can't wait till a third part to wrap this up because, God, I want to see. I don't know exactly how that all played out, so I can't wait to hear the end of it. And once again, I want to thank Mallory for sponsoring today's episode over there on the Patreons.
Thank you so much, Mallory. We love our patrons. You guys are the best. You've really helped support the show over the years, keep the lights on here at Mountain Murders.
It's true.
Cover our little podcast expenses. So we do greatly appreciate all of you, but we love all of our listeners.
We do.
And it's because of you we're still here 6 years in.
It is.
Recording another multi-part case.
That's 3 parts.
No, it'll be 3, maybe if we're lucky.
All
Hoping
right.
it won't be 4.
I'm going to go soak Heather in a pot of chicken soup.
Somebody needs to
Chicken noodle
dip
soup.
me in some like chest medicine.
Yeah.
What is that stuff called? That
I got some
Vapo?
Vicks. I got some.
You're going to have to dip me down in some Vapo rub.
I'm going to go put you in bed.
You know, I had like a box. This is the thing I hate about moving is I had this box of medications, you know, like NyQuil and cough syrups and medicine, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
And I had it all packed up and I've seen it recently, but I can't remember where I stuck it. And like a fool, I didn't put it in a useful spot like the medicine cabinet. So today I was prowling around trying to find this box of medicine and I don't know what I did with it. And now I'm probably going to have to break down and go buy all new medicines.
Yeah, and that stuff's not
And
it's expensive.
yeah, and I'm a cheapskate. And I hate to go buy cough drops when I know I've got a whole bag of them that haven't even been opened somewhere in the house. Just remains a mystery.
Oh, poor
Got
thing.
this fugitive box of medicine running around hiding.
Well, I'll help you go sniff it out.
Oh, thank you, Dylan.
All right, so until next time.
Until next time, they're going to stay jiggy with it. But before we leave, Dylan, I have one more thing I need to add. I did not mention it on the first part, so I need to get it to it on the second part. The resources I used for these episodes, I have in my hand a copy of Charles Moose's book, 3 Weeks in October, The Manhunt for the Serial Sniper. I have also obtained a copy of The Beltway Sniper Attacks by Fergus Mason. We have In Pursuit The Hunt for the Beltway Snipers by David Rickenbaugh. And, of course, multiple newspapers.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So those are some of the resources for today.
That sounds like some quality resources.
Bye, Dylan.
Bye.